HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen.
As our regular listeners are aware, during the last few months, U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, started by the Trump administration, was accelerated by the Biden administration while simultaneously abandoning the security and communication aspects of the Trump administration's plan. Stories coming out of the disaster have horrified the public in the U.S. and allied nations. Panic at the airport in Kabul led to deaths of fleeing Afghan citizens who tried to board or even just hold on to flights leaving the tarmac, some falling to their deaths and at least one confirmed to have been killed when the plane's landing gear closed on him. There has been a lot of news coverage regarding the Biden administration's undeniable catastrophic mishandling of the situation, and I'm not going to go over that blow by blow, because that video would be hours long. Tonight we're interested in media focus. Through the summer, reports of increasing Taliban violence have been coming out of Afghanistan, including a Human Rights Watch article published on August 3rd, which stated that advancing Taliban forces had summarily executed detained soldiers, police, and civilians with alleged ties to the Afghan government. The article stated that Human Rights Watch had obtained a list of 44 men killed by the Taliban, along with 19 security personnel and many others. Bloomberg reported concerns that the fighting could plunge the country into another civil war like the one that occurred in 1989 after the Soviet withdrawal. Multiple sources are reporting that the Taliban are going door to door, hunting for targets who worked for NATO forces or the previous Afghan government and carrying out house-to-house executions. According to a current UN report, it is in writing that unless they give themselves in, the Taliban will arrest and prosecute, interrogate, and punish family members on behalf of those individuals. A UN official warned that there could be mass executions of anyone on the Taliban's blacklist. It has even been reported that they've executed a man for being a folk singer after banning playing music in public. In the wake of the withdrawal disaster, rumors about men fleeing Afghanistan and leaving the women behind immediately fluttered through social media, with commenters posting cropped images as evidence. The Washington Post reported that men were disproportionately leaving, then gave an analysis on what conditions the writer thought might be causing them to do so. When full-frame images began to circulate, they showed that, in fact, men and women were both leaving on the same flights. A few days earlier, Bloomberg had quoted the United Nations Refugee Agency saying that of the nearly 250,000 Afghans who have been forced to flee their homes since the end of May, about 80% are women and children. If there are more men fleeing now, it could be because the women and children and their families had already been evacuated earlier in the summer. Meanwhile, according to the New York Post, the United Nations Human Rights Chief is concerned about strict restrictions on women. The Post quoted High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet stating that Afghanistan's diverse ethnic and religious minorities were particularly at risk of violence and repression. These concerns were sandwiched in between statements about credible reports of summary executions and children, meaning boys, being forced to act as soldiers. Alongside statements about people in hiding as the Taliban hunted for them door to door, with violent reprisals being reported, the commissioner stated that a fundamental red line will be the Taliban's treatment of women and girls. She went on, urging respect for their rights to liberty, freedom of movement, education, self-expression, and employment. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that any government organization should support social oppression of any demographic's rights or freedoms, but don't you think the part about people being hunted down and summarily executed while masses of terrorized citizens attempt to flee the country should be a priority issue? The nation is in the grip of a terrorist organization that forces boys into military service, murders citizens, and imposes an oppressive, extremely strict interpretation of an already strict religion on everybody under its control. They did not just start that behavior this summer. This is the same Taliban that ruled Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. As the Council for Foreign Relations describes, the Taliban imposed a harsh brand of justice as it consolidated territorial control. Taliban jurisprudence was drawn from the Pashtun's pre-Islamic code and interpretations of Sharia colored by the austere Wahhabi doctrines of the madrasa's Saudi benefactors. The regime neglected social services and other basic state functions, even as its Ministry for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice enforced prohibitions on behavior the Taliban deemed un-Islamic. It required women to wear the head-to-toe burqa, or shadri, banned music and television, and jailed men whose beards it deemed too short. One aspect of Sharia enforcement was described in a Reuters article. Gay men in Kabul say they fear for their lives under Taliban rule, as they hide at home, holding out in hope of a Western evacuation before Islamists carry out a threat to punish LGBT+ Afghans with death. Reports of the group stoning gay men to death when last in power and of judicial support for a return now to capital punishment have left some LGBT+ people cowering indoors. Execution for homosexuality is something that is uniquely faced by men. Terror is visited upon all ages, both sexes, and people of all stripes by the Islamic extremists that have taken over Afghanistan. They are quite literally equal opportunity horrors. This will be a living nightmare for citizens who have become accustomed to freedom during the last 2 decades. All citizens, not just one sex. So what is the purpose of emphasizing the experiences of women? Is it because men are not being murdered? Is it because their lives are not going to change under the laws imposed by the Taliban? Or is it because gynocentric narratives are a useful means of manipulating people? This week, HBR Talk is going to discuss the gynocentric filter that is being put over the Afghanistan crisis and the exploitation of public gynocentrism as a means of promoting actions government entities want the public to support. The discussion streams on multiple platforms. You can tune in to the YouTube live stream or find other viewing options on HoneyBadgerBrigade.com.